rev your engines and strap in because the Mad Max saga is back with a vengeance. That's right, after a 9-year wait, we're finally getting a new installment in this fan-favorite universe. Surely this will be another hit in a franchise with no misses, at least box office-wise. Well, pump the brakes a little bit, because believe it or not, the franchise's return on investment has been dropping with each new title, even as the budgets have been skyrocketing, with the latest installment being the most expensive yet. But wait, there's more. This Mad Max saga doesn't even feature the legendary Max Rockatansky. Instead, it focuses on Furiosa, which, let's be honest, the name kind of gives that away. And while the character was an instant hit with fans, Charlize Theron will not be reprising her role from Fury Road. So, with a budget that could make even Scrooge McDuck nervously check his bank account, a story that's taking a detour from the main man himself, and a cast of newcomers, it begs the question, will Furiosa keep the Mad Max franchise riding high on the Fury Road to box office glory? Or will it crash and burn, joining the ranks of the recent ultra-high budget flops? To answer this, we asked over 3,000 movie lovers, scoured the internet, trawled through countless comment sections, and crunched a whole lot of numbers. We even did some clever psychometrics to determine how fans reacted to the new cast, analyzed the marketing strategies, and assessed the impact of Anya Taylor-Joy's spiky premiere dress. All of this to figure out how these factors might impact the box office performance of Furiosa. So let's start with the budget. How big is it exactly? Well, when we say skyrocketing, we mean it. IMDb lists it at $168 million, while Yahoo Entertainment lists the budget at a staggering $233 million. Either way, this is crazy compared to the original 1979 classic, which was made for only around 400,000 Australian dollars, or about 1.2 million American rubles in today's money. Whether it was your introduction to Mel Gibson, Australian cinema, the post-apocalyptic BDSM aesthetic, or just the world's most out-there PSA about safe driving, the little indie flick made quite the impression, grossing $100 million worldwide. Although only $8 million of that was from the US box office, this alone is still more than 20 times its budget. So why the huge range in the budget estimates for Furiosa? The difference could simply be a currency conversion question, as 168 million US is at the time of writing about 250 million Australian. Is it possible the higher figure is in Australian dollars and just not labeled clearly? Or did someone see a dollar sign and pretty much just assume it must mean good old freedom bucks? God, check your privilege, America. However, the Yahoo article notes, as does a Variety article, that grants from the Australian government account for $135 million of the budget, and claims therefore that Warner Brothers only had to put in $98 million of their own money. If we were to believe the $168 million as the total budget, and $135 of that came from the Australian government, then the studio would have only put in $33 million. That doesn't seem right, so we're not entirely sure what to make of this, especially when you factor in Miller as an unreliable narrator. Over the years, his figure for the Mad Max budget has ranged from $250,000 to $300,000, with some sources reporting up to $400K, but I digress. Considering the domestic opening weekend projections for Furiosa are somewhere between $40 and $50 million, about on par with Fury Road, the film is almost guaranteed to far surpass the studio's $98 million input, if that is indeed the right figure. Frankly, a $135 million government film grant is unheard of, although maybe they thought it would boost tourism. You know, like people would see Furiosa's deserted wasteland and think, yeah, now that's a holiday destination. But more probably, the production created jobs and brought a projected $285 million to the local economy, far outweighing the investment, and the funding did convince VFX giant DNEG to open their new office in Sydney. So maybe the plan is to use Mad Max to turn Australia into a production mecca, like The Lord of the Rings did for New Zealand. But while it can be entertaining seeing studios play around with the equivalent of the GDP of some small countries, a big budget is not enough of a draw anymore for audiences, as we have seen from the multitude of high-budget flops in recent years. Looking at you, Argyle, Napoleon, Fall Guy. So what's the movie about? Okay, so you know in Fury Road how Charlize Theron played Imperator Furiosa? Shaved head and robot arm? That's the one. And you were probably thinking, hey, I wonder what her deal is. Well, George Miller heard you and delivered her origin story. The film is her odyssey as Furiosa is kidnapped from her home and ends up in the hands of the warlord Dementus. Sorry, that's Dr. Dementus, with a PhD in applied motorcycle chariot physics. They travel through the wasteland, which is Mad Max speak for outback, which is Australian speak for desert, and run into Immortan Joe's citadel. You remember, the kinda gross pale guy with the bodysuit and mask with the teeth on the outside? Joe and Dementus battle it out while Furiosa must survive many trials and try to make her way back home. So while it does sound more character-centric, there are plenty of crazy vehicles, war boys, motorcycle chariots, and more that you would expect from a Mad Max film. The story of Furiosa apparently predates Fury Road and was conceived to flesh out Theron's character and give the actor some context. Are you excited to learn more about the character's past? Or do you not care as long as it doesn't take too much time away from war boys jumping off of trucks with explosives? From our data, nerd alert! Most high moviegoer demographics don't care, as evidenced by the poor retention rate of the shots of baby Furiosa, although some are interested in using her backstory as a vehicle, get it, to explore wider Mad Max lore. Majority of those we polled felt they already knew as much as they wanted to about Furiosa from the hints at her origins in Fury Road, and that they enjoyed the mystery surrounding her. They were, however, interested in knowing more about other characters, namely Dr. Dementus, as well as the Bullet Farmer and the People Eater from Fury Road. Another prominent topic in the comment, no Tom Hardy. Not even a little bit. Not even an unstable Max, let alone full-blown mad. About 12% mentioned being disappointed that he did not feature. But fear not, for his return has been confirmed for the next film, Mad Max The Wasteland. Now let's look at who made this crazy thing. Warboys? Dementus? Furiosa? Immortan Joe? What kind of person could have come up with character names like that, I hear you ask? Well, obviously the same guy who wrote, produced, and directed this Oscar-winning family animation about adorable dancing penguins. Director George Miller actually has a pretty great track record for making successful movies, at a first glance. With 8 of the 13 films he directed, Babe along with Happy Feet were his greatest hits outside of the Mad Max franchise. So his specialty is R-rated chaos and destruction, or kids movies about talking animals, which is pretty badass. Maybe if we wait long enough, Miller will treat us to the Babe Mad Max crossover we didn't know we needed. As we mentioned before, all 4 Mad Max movies to date have made back their production budgets domestically, and only Fury Road has failed to double it. It's interesting to note that while the box office gross of the Mad Max franchise has continued to rise, the budget to box office ratio has been dropping almost exponentially, and Furiosa, even at the lowest estimates of $168 million, will be the most expensive to date. Miller's most recent film, 3,000 Years of Longing, flopped pretty spectacularly, and his track record for non-post-apocalyptic desert-based sequels is pretty poor, with both Happy Feet 2 and Babe Pig in the City underperforming. So is Furiosa doomed to continue the sequel trend? Not if the cast have anything to say about it. So who's in it? Taking up the mantle of Furiosa and sparking some backlash after Miller recast Charlize Theron is Anya Taylor-Joy. If you feel like she's everywhere right now, it's because she is, having been in 10 films in the last 10 years. Some are even calling her the new Pedro Pascal. Known for projects like The Menu and The Queen's Gambit, this is her first action role. And honestly, the casting makes sense. Seems like if you need a badass chick who don't take no nonsense, you know who to call. While very popular, her box office track record is not as stellar as you might think. We can see that less than half of the films where she played a major role, not including things like her few seconds in Dune, made back their production budget, with only 2 being truly successful and also making back their marketing budgets. One of these was Split, which was driven more by James McAvoy's performance, helping the film make back 15 times its production budget domestically. The other success was Robert Eggers' The Witch, which was her first major role, starring alongside a goat. The only other 2 films that did not completely bomb at the domestic box office were Emma and The Menu. Additionally, out of all the films where she played a major role, she only appeared in 2 non-horror or art house movies. While she has 11 million Instagram followers, it seems unlikely that this will turn into ticket sales, as her posts promoting Furiosa have not gotten nearly the traction of her more fashion-centered posts. Looking at fellow it girl Zendaya's first lead role in Challengers, her 185 million followers only turned into $15 million on the opening weekend, 66% of which she was responsible for, according to our research. The fact is that Taylor-Joy's box office appeal is unproven in anything of this scale or budget level. While the reveal of her role in Dune Part 2 did get a lot of media attention, she was hardly a main draw for moviegoers, except for that unfortunate 1% of audiences who would have left very disappointed. Furiosa could really set the tone for her market value in the blockbuster space, and given how prolific she is, it does seem like she's being set up to become a huge star. But you know who is tried and tested at the 9-figure budget level? That's right, Chris Hemsworth, who plays Dr. Dementus. While his career box office numbers look pretty solid, with more than half of his films making back their production budgets and just over a fifth also making back their marketing budgets, we have to take into account that 8 of his major roles were in Thor or Avengers movies, which are much more reliant on the character than the actor, and to put it delicately, they money. Looking at his 14 other significant roles outside of Marvel, we see a worse picture, with no true breakout success and only 25% making back their production budget. 2 of these were his earlier supporting roles in Cabin in the Woods and A Perfect Getaway, with only 1 as a leading man in 12 Strong. This is especially painful considering that the average budget of his major roles outside Marvel is around $66 million, with the 4 titles over $100 million all being flops. And that's not including the Ghostbusters reboot, which, let's be fair, wasn't his fault.
Is it the boobs you don't like? Because I can make them bigger.
Also, his latest role in Thor Love and Thunder was not very well received by audiences, with even Hemsworth himself admitting that he didn't stick the landing. However, streaming audiences did love him in Extraction 2, which shares more overlap with Mad Max fans, and him opening up about his disappointment in the Thor performance might convince people that this is an exciting comeback. Our social listening reveals that 15% of audiences actively talk about it being a refreshing role for him, while our poll suggests that 70% of his fans are more excited to see him in this role than they would in another Marvel movie. He is by far the biggest cast draw for the film, having more than 4 times the pull of Anya Taylor-Joy, which sounds like a burn, but let's not forget, he was a star in one of the biggest franchises ever, and has been around way longer. Wait, now that sounds like a burn. Oh god. Moving on, let's compare these figures to those of the stars of Fury Road. If we take Tom Hardy's filmography and narrow it down to the 15 films where he played a protagonist or was a major draw, including films like Dunkirk, but excluding films like Rock'n'Roller or Layer Cake, we see that 47% of his movies made back their production budgets, and 27% were real breakouts. This is consistent with his filmography as a whole, where it's 44% success rate and 30% breakouts. And yes, that does include Star Trek Nemesis. And of course, let's not forget the OG Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron. Her films similarly tend to make back their production budget around 40% of the time, and be breakouts 25% of the time. Whether considering her extensive filmography with over 50 roles, or just the half she was lead in, the ratio remains the same. So, the new stars don't have the success rate of the OGs, but they are riding high off of the hype and adoration that they created. You could say that Fury Road has paved the road for Furiosa. So how has the film been promoted? We've seen 3 trailers for Furiosa, all highlighting different features of the movie. According to our data, the most talked about moments from the chaotic, action-soaked first trailer were Hemsworth's motorcycle chariot, Taylor-Joy screaming "I am Furiosa," and the reveal of her robotic arm. Given the action focus, it makes sense that the popular moments were the characters just being badass. Plus, Hemsworth in a chariot is like Thor. And it looks like Warner Bros. Paid attention to the fans' interests here by having Hemsworth and Taylor-Joy ride a motorcycle chariot down Hollywood Boulevard, driven by a genuine war boy. Good job, Warner. The second trailer focuses much more on Furiosa's story, her kidnapping, her mother, and her quest to return to her homeland. More character-driven and sentimental, and if you're starting to drift off here, you wouldn't be the only one. But again, the most talked about moments were the motorcycle chariot, Hemsworth laughing as his head is nearly blown off by Taylor-Joy's sniper rifle, and Furiosa screaming or looking intense. Kinda seems like audiences maybe only want badassery. And boy did they save the best for last, as the tickets on sale trailer was nearly 3 times as effective as the first 2 at turning views into tickets. It focused almost entirely on Hemsworth's Dr. Dementus at the beginning, showing more of him in his chariot and having him narrate, hinting at more world building around him, before using a cool rewind effect to showcase all the moments that made Fury Road so epic and cinema worthy. Remember, the fans we polled were much more interested in him than Furiosa's backstory. Oh, and the final trailer also featured this guy. Like, what's his deal, right? We've also done a lot of social listening, and while there's plenty of praise for Miller's direction and excitement for Hemsworth to play a fresh and slightly unhinged character, the most mentioned topic is concern over the heavy use of CGI and the disappointment in the lack of practical effects. Miller stated that about 90% of Fury Road was made with practical effects, and the shots were only augmented with VFX. This was the key to the immersive experience of the movie, especially in theaters. We know from our data that Furiosa's appeal skews 67% experiential, meaning that it is more about being immersed in the world and, experiencing the thrill of the story, rather than something you see so you can talk to your peers about it and be in the loop. So anything that could take people out of the moment, like bad or overused CGI, will really impact the audience reception. This seems like a questionable move for Miller, and there has been some speculation about why he might have done this. For one, the production of Fury Road was very taxing, mentally and physically, for the cast and crew, and a lot of this came from the insistence on practical and extremely dangerous stunts. We've heard how Theron and Hardy didn't get along at all on set, and kinda hated each other as their characters did. They've said that part of the reason was that being crammed in a truck in the desert for days at a time really wore them down.
You need to cut out all your loser crybaby crap right now and think of something scientific.
Miller was hoping to avoid this kind of tension on the set of Furiosa by leaning on CG more. Not that it wasn't still grueling, and there is plenty of real driving and chasing and exploding. Let us know what you guys thought of the CGI in the trailer. The filming was also interrupted in 2022 by the COVID pandemic. It's possible that Miller was planning more practical effects, but just wasn't able to complete them. Beyond the trailers, we've seen 4 30-second TV spots that, by our data, failed to grab people's attention. But don't worry about that little misstep. They've still got the pure star power of Taylor-Joy and Hemsworth to grab all the attention they could need, although there has been a distinct focus on Australian TV, rather than the American staples that you might expect, like Kimmel or Fallon. Given the Australian government's seemingly enormous investment into the film, making it the largest ever production in Australia, we can speculate that part of the terms of the funding could have included heavy local promotion. Or maybe Hemsworth just didn't want to travel that far. But while the cast and director are missing from US talk shows, they're all over other major publications. Hemsworth appeared on the cover of May's issue of Vanity Fair, where he discussed Furiosa in a glowing article about his move away from Hollywood, expansion as an actor, and just what an all-around hot, great guy he is. Vanity Fair's 44 million monthly readership is 77% women who, it may surprise you to learn, do not overlap much with Furiosa's audience. But while our research shows that the film only has 32% female audience appeal, Mr. Hemsworth scores quite a bit higher in that category. This feature is a great move towards appealing to female audiences, as long as no one mentions the prosthetics obscuring Thor's face. Taylor-Joy got a long and in-depth interview in May's Variety, where Furiosa was front and center. Continuing the discussion from Fury Road of Furiosa as a feminist hero does align with current Hollywood messaging and may just help to get women to come out and see the movie. Although leaning on the message to sell tickets has famously backfired for a lot of Thor's cohort. Not to mention, 70% of Gen Zers that we polled think their media is so oversaturated with political messaging that they just don't want it in their movies. As you all know by now, we like to talk about adjacent audiences on this channel. Not just because reaching out to markets whose interests overlap with the film you're promoting is a great way to expand the reach of your movie, but also because it makes us sound real smart. We've gathered data which shows that fans of the NFL, NBA, and NHL indexed very highly, meaning they have a strong interest in the movie. That makes it kind of surprising that Warner Bros. Did not buy any ad space in the Superbowl back in February. They have, however, placed a halftime ad during the NBA playoffs featuring superstar Damian Lillard. Maybe the studio just didn't want to pay the reported $7 million for a 30-second ad during the Super Bowl. Fans of animation and comics also indexed very highly, which offered an opportunity for some creative promotion. Wouldn't it have been cool to see some animated shorts to tease the movie? It worked well for Blade Runner 2049. Or heck, the whole of Fury Road was famously fully storyboarded into 3,500 plus panels before any dialogue had been written. Maybe they could have released that as a comic book to build back the hype around the franchise. Action RPGs were the highest indexing video game genre, and there was definitely an opportunity to promote through the 2015 Mad Max open world game. It would have been cool to see some Furiosa DLC, or even a browser game. We are seeing more and more successful crossovers like The Last of Us and the new Fallout series. And let's not forget the hotly anticipated Borderlands movie, whose universe takes more than a little inspiration from Mad Max. Oddly enough, fans of racing sports, whether as video games or IRL, did not show interest in the movie. That probably explains why Hemsworth, Taylor-Joy, and Miller's little spot about their favorite vehicles from the movie on the YouTube channel Motor Trend did not gain as much traction as you might expect from the channel's nearly 7 million subscribers. Given that the vehicles are such a prominent part of the film, this felt like a natural crossover. Also not interested were fans of fashion. Somewhat surprising as Fury Road won the Oscar for Best Costume, and the Mad Max franchise did basically invent the post-apocalyptic BDSM aesthetic back in the 1979 classic. So while crazy premiere outfits made a splash for Doom Part 2, Taylor-Joy's spiked dress, while very much on theme, did not garner much attention for Furiosa. So when and where is it being released? The film will premiere at Cannes, as Fury Road did, which adds a status and prestige to the movie. This also attracts frequent moviegoers who are likely to see the film on IMAX or premium screens. We predict they will turn out in much higher numbers than the norm for Furiosa's opening weekend. The Australian premiere will be the 23rd of May, with the US following the day after on the 24th. It will be the latest blockbuster to release in IMAX, which has seen a huge resurgence recently, with Nolan and Villeneuve in particular championing the format, with films like Tenet, Oppenheimer, and the Dune franchise. While normal theaters are still struggling post-pandemic, with global earnings last year still a quarter under their pre-pandemic levels, IMAX is thriving, with box office takings of $1.1 billion last year, its highest to date in the US and Canada. What do you think about IMAX? Has it become your preferred way to experience blockbusters? Let us know below. The only competition releasing the same weekend is Garfield, which, considering it's a U-rated animation, won't be dividing thrill-seeking action fans at the movies. It may have to compete with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, though, which does share themes of post-apocalypse and enslaved humans, but will have already been out for 2 weeks. So there you have it. We've scoured the internet, combed through the data, and left no comment section unturned, so you don't have to. And we want to hear from you as well. Do you want a character-driven Mad Max movie? Were you disappointed that this one wasn't about him at all? Do you love CGI for expanding what is possible, or does it take away from the believability of what you're watching? Let us know in the comments section, and head on over to Popcorn to tell the studios exactly what you think about the movies they make. And for more analysis like this, check out our last video on A24 and their first big blockbuster, Civil War, on screen now. Pick me, and subscribe.